Courtney said, I'm Stacy Walker. I'm the Education and Program Coordinator at New Canaan Cares. And first and foremost, we want to thank Courtney, Jerry, and Principal Egan for having us today, for hosting us here in person, and for our partnership with the high school. It's just a wonderful partnership, and we're very grateful for it. So some of you may be familiar with New Canaan Cares, but if you're not, I'm just going to give you a little background on who we are. We are an independent, nonprofit community organization, and our mission is to advance the health and well-being of youth and families. We provide free, responsive educational programs that support and strengthen parenting skills, positive youth development, and healthy lifestyles. Fun fact, we've been here for over 40 years, and our offices were first here at New Canaan High School. So it is my pleasure to introduce Emma Kate Friedman for our program today, A Guide to Modern Teen Dating. She was the first person I thought of when Courtney, Jerry, and I talked and said, we need to talk about dating. I'm like, ooh, I know who to call. As Courtney said, she wants to be open and honest and have the conversation, wants to know what you guys want to know, what you're hearing. Ask her the questions. She loves questions. She does. Yes. So Emma Kate is a licensed professional counselor and specializes in working with adolescents, young adults, and their families. She earned her undergraduate degree in psychology and family studies from Miami University and has a master's in clinical mental health counseling from Fairfield University. Emma Kate facilitates the adolescent intensive outpatient program at Silver Hill Hospital, which is great because that helped be her focus group of what teens are saying and what they want you to know. She also offers aftercare support and trauma counseling. She has a small private practice. And another fun fact, Emma Kate was the teen talk counselor here at New Canaan High School before going to Silver Hill Hospital. So she knows our kids, she knows our community, and Emma Kate, take it away.
Good morning. Make sure I have my beverages. This is my first in-person presentation in like 2 years. I'm a little nervous. This is so fun to see everybody, though. So welcome, good morning. So little outline, this is what I plan to do, so it can help you maybe form questions. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe broad overview of what does the landscape of dating look like right now for adolescents, because it is kind of changing little by little. I came up with a really fun glossary of some terms that kids are using so we can understand what they're talking about. And then I have some feedback from my kiddos on what do they wish their parents or parents in general knew about dating. And some approaches from like a counselor seat on how to talk to our kids about dating when maybe they don't want to. Does that all sound okay? I have my phone here, not because I'm going to multitask, but because I want to be mindful of time and save time for questions. So if I'm going too fast, someone just tell me to slow down. Dealio? Cool. So 2 things I think to keep in mind before we get started, both having to do with kind of where our kids are in their age and space of development. And a lot of you know this and have heard this, but I think it bears repeating. You know, our adolescents, our high schoolers are at an age and stage where they're looking toward that independence, that autonomy, identity development. Who am I to the world? Who am I maybe outside of my family? Who am I in a relationship? And who do I spend my time with? So forming relationships, dating, exploring dating, learning like communication styles are all a part of that identity formation. Right? So there's going to be stumbles along the way, there's going to maybe be serial dating along the way, and to an extent that actually is developmentally appropriate and expected. This is how we try on the different hats and figure out who am I in a relationship. The other thing to keep in mind, again, with their development is that part of their brain that helps them with regulating emotions, making good decisions, information and database decisions, impulsivity, risk-taking, it's not there. Not fully formed yet. So they're feeling their feelings more intensely than probably they ever will in their whole lives. And they're partnering up with someone else who also is feeling their feelings really intensely and doesn't have great impulse control and probably not excellent decision making. Even the most mature kids make like the dumbest mistakes. So keeping that in mind, I think in the landscape of dating is important too, because as frustrating as some of this might be, it's also kind of expected, and then it's knowing my kid, what's safe and appropriate for my kiddo, and when are we maybe running into something that I need more help and guidance on. So there's my disclaimer. Okay, so, oh, I already messed up. There we go. Okay, so what does dating look like now? The way I think of it is sort of like all the things that we are used to from our dating experiences, but sprinkle in social media. Everything is happening remotely, over tech, virtually. So who's comfortable sharing when you were in high school and you had a crush on somebody? How did you let them know? Note passing, right? And hoping the teacher wouldn't catch it. The note passing, sharing the phone number. What else? How did you let someone know maybe that you were interested? Right? Yeah, like, oh, what do you think about, Emma Kate? What do you think? Yeah. I can. Can we do that, Stacey? Yeah, can you all see it okay?
And also, we're recording this meeting. I mean, not that that's something you can download, but you can also watch this.
Rewatch.
Yeah, that's always posted on the PFA website. Yeah.
Excellent. Good. It's one of my glossary terms. No, you're good. IRL's in real life, right? So there's lots of that differentiating, right, between talking to someone, texting, Snapchatting on Instagram versus actually taking it offline and having in real life interactions, which sometimes doesn't even happen. Sometimes the relationship goes kaput before we even get to that point. It's hard to take it offline. So thinking about some of the things that we used to do to initiate dating or even like express to somebody that like we're interested or we have a crush, right? All of that stuff is still happening. It's just happening to a different extent and it's been tweaked a little bit. Right? So instead of maybe asking my friend to ask, my husband's name is Matt, so Matt's going to be the example all day. Instead of asking my friend to ask Matt, like, what do you think of Emma Kate? Do you think she's cute? What I might do instead is follow Matt on Instagram, follow Matt on Snapchat, add him on Snapchat. Maybe I'll do a deep like of some of his pictures. So if he has a couple posts, I'm not going to like the most recent post because then he might not see that I liked it. So I'm going to like maybe the past 3 posts. So he's going to see my name coming up a couple times. That's how I might communicate like, hey, I'm looking at your pictures. I'm a little intrigued. I'm interested. And then if we start doing that to each other, we start liking each other's photos and start following some of the same accounts, that might be where I message them or DM them. So I'll talk about that too. So we're still doing like the note passing. We're still treading lightly with like communicating with somebody and flirting and letting them know I'm interested without telling them I'm interested. It's just often happening on social media. And from what I understand with working with adolescents almost exclusively and straight from my kids, this is really largely happening on social media. They're not doing it over text. Text, they know you guys are reading their texts. So on social media, especially Snapchat, you can make your messages disappear. Or on Instagram, you can have, I think it's called shadow, where your messages disappear after a little while. So it feels a little more private in the sense that like someone's not going to screenshot my conversation and share it with all their friends, right? Or someone's not going to scroll back through our conversation and call out one little thing I said a week ago. It feels a little more anonymous. It's not, but it has the feeling of being that way. We're still hanging out with each other. We're still orchestrating little dates. It just might take a little longer to get there than it would have a few years ago. Initiated online and relationships, even established ones, a lot of communication is still happening online, right? Like on our phones, virtually, FaceTiming, because it's easier, right? We don't have to, I keep thinking about like the landline system and having to wait for someone to get home to reach them and then hope, right? Like we don't have to do that anymore. They can just constantly be talking to each other for better or worse. So there's lots of communication happening that way. They might not see each other all day. Hi, Jack. They might not actually see each other all day, but they've been talking all day, right? How many of you have ever had one of your kids come home and say, oh yeah, I saw my boyfriend or I saw my girlfriend today. We didn't talk to each other. They didn't acknowledge me in the hallway. It's so odd and it's so common. They don't need to acknowledge each other in person. They're already talking. And if they haven't taken the relationship offline, if it's not IRL, if they haven't had like the defining the relationship talk, oh, we're not talking in person. No. And in New Canaan, Darien, Wilton, Weston are towns where it's like a one public high school town. There does tend to be a trend and a pull of seeking out relationships from other towns or other high schools, simply because a lot of the kids have known each other since they were so little. They feel like they already know everybody and would know if they're interested. So that's why you might see, I remember when I was working here, there were lots of girls who were like, oh, I want to date someone at Fairfield Prep. It's like, that's 45 minutes away. What are you doing? St. Luke's is right down the street. But, any questions about this so far? Want to see my nerdy glossary? I'm almost there. Okay. Oops, I gotta use the remote. Okay, so my kids helped me with this. They were very excited about it. So I have an adolescent IOP at Silver Hill. So that's maybe I pulled about 20 kids from there. But then I also have my private practice, and I have groups in Darien that I assist with. So I got this feedback that I'll show you guys later from just under 100 kids, and a pretty good cross-section of kids. Some of them are in treatment, some of them are more in like volunteer groups, so and they're all in high school. So I'm hoping this is a pretty accurate poll. And I'm sure this will not capture all of the terms that they're using, but maybe a good place to get started. So remember earlier when I said I might like do a deep like and like a bunch of posts on Instagram, and then I might message them? That's when we're talking about when people say like I'm sliding in, or I'm DMing, or I'm sliding in the DMs. DM is a direct message on Instagram. And it doesn't necessarily always refer to Instagram. They'll also use that when they're talking about TikTok. They'll use it when they're making private chats on Discord. It just refers to, I'm reaching out to someone privately on social media. And in a lot of ways, it's seen as like an initiation of like, hey, I'm kind of interested, in a little more concrete way than just liking photos. This might be where they start talking, right? And this is the talking stage. We're not dating, we're just talking. Right? I'm expressing some interest. Maybe this is when we get flirty. We might hang out, but probably not. This is where I might be talking to someone who I've been introduced to on social media through a friend that I've never actually met in person. They might not live in New Canaan. And we're just talking, getting to know each other, chatting. I'm feeling them out. I might be talking to multiple people at a time, right? Why pare it down to one person? Then I might get FOMO. I might have fear of missing out if I'm only talking to one person. So this is where we're just, again, feeling each other out. Ghosting is when we're talking, and then they just disappear. This will often happen, again, with the kids who are maybe talking to someone from another school, or someone who's not in their grade, someone they don't know really well, where there's not a whole lot of accountability for them to stick around and do maybe the polite thing and say, hey, I'm just not that interested. Ghosting is sort of what it sounds like, where they just disappear. Curving's a little different. That's where maybe now I'm inconsistently reaching back out. I'm not answering. I'm coming up with a big excuse every time for why I'm not hanging out, or why I'm not answering your text or your DM, or why I'm not expressing interest, until I ultimately kind of fade out. When people who have ghosted me or curved me suddenly pop back in, that's zombieing. I think it's my favorite term of all of them. When they come back up. And it's often, superficial. They're not actually trying to engage in anything. It might be that they're looking for a sext. It might be that they're looking to see where the relationship goes. They might just want some attention and be bored, right? So when kids talk about ghosting, curving, zombieing, or submarining, where someone like reemerges and then goes dark, that's another favorite. That's kind of what they're talking about. Anything you all would add to this? Oh, thanks. Mm-hmm. Yep. Keeping them interested, right? And then it also might happen if I take the relationship offline, but then I'm like, I gotta bench you. I gotta re-explore. So I'm still gonna keep you interested. I'm still gonna be talking to you. I'm just gonna have a bunch of reasons why we can't see each other in person. That's where the breadcrumbing benching comes in. Thank you for pointing that out. I almost skipped it. Go ahead. FOMO stands for fear of missing out. So in this context, like fear of missing out on like a better connection than someone who I'm talking to. So I'm going to talk to multiple people and see who fits my vibe. Okay, IRL in real life. This is usually when like we might take the relationship offline. It might be an indicator that things are like a little more serious being a relative term. Just we're no longer exclusively talking online. We are actually going to see each other in person, have in-person interactions, and use those maybe social skills that a lot of us miss out on when things are exclusively online. If they've gotten to this point, they've likely had the DTR. They've defined the relationship. This is where we have the actual conversation about what are we doing? Are we interested in each other? Do you want to hang out? Are you calling me my girlfriend? Like, what are we doing here? They might still say that they're defining the relationship as talking, because God forbid we actually acknowledge that we're dating each other. Cuffing, I was very familiar with this one. I feel like cuffing is a term that's been around for a while. No? Okay. I've heard of this one in terms of like engagement season. Like, you know, that period between like October and January where it's like, oh my God, all my friends' kids are engaged. Everyone's getting engaged so that they can plan their summer wedding. So the high school equivalent is that period where it seems like everyone's kind of pairing up. We're all hibernating. We're all getting cozy and hanging out. But it's so I can have a relationship by Valentine's Day. Be in that longer term relationship before the biggest holiday of the year, folks. Who's heard of their kid being left on red? Devastating. Oh, it is the worst thing that can happen. This is when you send someone a message, a DM, a text, whatever, and you can see that the person read it, but they don't respond. And it elicits just, a spiral. What, are they mad at me? Why aren't they responding to me? Are they not interested anymore? Did I do something wrong? So I cannot tell you, when I was working here at the high school, the number of kids who would come into my office just so upset. Like, they left me on red and I don't know what to do and I can't focus and I don't, what should I be doing? It's really difficult to sit in that distress for a lot of these kids. Go for it.
Also be the same sex, like your friend.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Oh.
in the city and I live in Canaan and I send a messages.
Yeah.
He opens somebody never responds.
He opens, I can see it. Why did we decide to let people see if we can read a text also? I am so spacey. The number of times that I have opened a text and then just forgotten to respond to it, I must LOR all the time. But yes, this will happen a lot with friendships too, where why isn't she responding to me? Why isn't he responding to me? Are they angry with me? Did I do something? And they don't have distress tolerant skills. Adolescents aren't known for being able to tolerate distress like excellently. So this can sometimes create a conflict. Thirst trapping, thirsting is just posting a picture where you look good, hoping that the person you're interested in will see it. It's like that flirty pose, or, you know, I look good, my friend told me I look good. If it doesn't get enough likes or attention, we're going to delete it and pretend like I never put it up. And then, who's heard of the ick? This might be my second place favorite. Do you want me to do the pronunciation I heard from my kids? The ick. But it's when someone does something that you don't like, it's cringy, like immediate turn off, not interested anymore, which is unfortunate because it could just be one thing that someone does, but they've captured this feeling of like that disgust response, and it's the ick. So if someone references, I was interested, then I caught the ick, it's they did something that I didn't like I can't even see myself with that person anymore. Anything I'm missing? Or any terms you guys have heard?
What if someone never opens it at all? Like on Snapchat, if someone sent you something and you just never.
So you can see on Snapchat if someone's opened the message or not.
What's it called when someone doesn't even bother to open it?
They'll just say like they didn't open it.
Is that ghosting?
So ghosting would be like if they totally stop reading, acknowledging the messages at all. And often, again, I'm biased, but based on my interactions with the kids, if they don't open it at all, that they often tolerate that better than they read it and then they didn't respond to me, right? Because there's less excuses to be made about like, oh, maybe they just didn't see it. Maybe they changed their account. Maybe they got their phone taken away. Because if they opened it and read it, well, why wouldn't you respond immediately? Right? Does that help answer that? Yeah. Okay. So I do. One of my kids gave me one. Who's familiar with Charlie Puth, the singer? Apparently he elicits ick. So when someone said, you know, I saw him lip syncing Charlie Puth to me in a video, and I just, the ick. I don't like that. Like the cheesy things, the cringy things, something that I just, for whatever reason, someone else might love this. I don't like it. I don't like that at all. Right, like, or who, okay, I'm gonna lose all my credibility. Does anyone ever watch The Bachelor? You know, every season there's a country date. A lot of people might elicit, that might be the ick for a lot of people, right? Where it's, oh, we're dancing on our own to a concert that was magically put on, right? The forced feeling, the over-romanticized stuff, a lot of kids really don't like that. So that might be where they talk about the ick. Does that help? Okay. Have I lost you now that I've acknowledged that I watched The Bachelor?
In the context of high school, what does it mean to hook up?
So it depends. So hookup usually doesn't mean having sex. It usually means everything but, and can encompass everything but. So it can be helpful to clarify when you say hooking up, what do you mean? Like for me, it elicits making out, maybe some physical things. Am I wrong? Right? Most of my kids, when they talk about hooking up, they're not talking about having sex. But again, that it changes. Different friend groups even have like different definitions. So I asked my group, I said of about 90 to 100 kiddos, what are some things that you wish your parents knew? What are some misconceptions that you think like your parents or parents in general might have about dating? This is your platform to kind of give feedback. So I tried to capture, these are the things that I heard multiple times from all the kids. So I'll give you a second just to look and have a sip of water. Excuse me. The things I heard most often were around trust, privacy, almost feeling offended that my parents think I might be doing something that they disapprove of, or they get the feeling that there's an assumption that my parents think I'm going behind their back doing something that they don't want me to do. There was a lot of talk about I don't want to be set up with somebody. If I want to date somebody, I'll probably do that on my own. Please stop setting me up with your friend's kid. I thought that was funny. A lot of when I hang out with someone, if there's someone that I'm interested in, if they're of the gender I'm interested in, it doesn't automatically mean we're dating, right? I can hang out with my guy friends, I can hang out with my girlfriends, and it can be platonic. We cannot be attracted to each other. And I think that's especially true, like I said, in these towns where some of these kids have really known each other since they were so little. One thing that did come up quite a bit, and I thought it might be a good talking point for us if we have time later, a lot of them alluded to when there's a lot of rules in place around dating, when I'm not allowed to date, or I'm not allowed to date until, or I'm not allowed to date a certain pool of people, or I have to be home by 8 o'clock after seeing a certain person. It doesn't exactly help create obedience or collaborative conversations with my family. It just makes it easier for me helps me figure out how to get around the rules easier, how to be a better liar, basically. And I thought that was helpful for us to know too, in terms of like, well, what can we do with that? With improving our communication, making it easier for kids to come to us and have those conversations so that I don't have to put rules in place for fear of something happening. My kid will come to me if they're needing that assistance. Anything sticking out on here? Any of this sound familiar? Yeah, excellent. Okay. I wish they would ask me if I feel safe, if I'm happy, and if they would ask me questions instead of jumping in, lecturing, assuming. Those were the words that kept coming up. I was surprised and a little encouraged actually about how often consent came up. Kids are definitely curious. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think short answer, rules around safety are always okay. We just have to make sure that those rules are communicated and that kids know where they're coming from so that they don't appear punitive, right? When it's the because I said so or it even feels like that, that's where we run into the let me try to get around this. My parents don't know anything, right? If they feel like they have a say in it, they're gonna adhere to it more. Right? If we give them choices, even if they don't like all of the choices, the element of choice just tends to make things go a little bit better. So it's kind of around being effective versus being right. And we'll talk about that. Okay. I added some points at the end because I figured we probably wouldn't have time to go over everything. If anyone has questions about consent or wants to get comfortable talking about what is consent, how do I give consent, I linked at the end of my presentation, which will be shared with you guys, some good places to get started and how to talk to your kids at different ages about consent, if some of you have younger kiddos. But I was very encouraged that this came up so much because it means that kids are talking about it with each other too and wanting to be more informed. And I heard this from boys and my girls. right? What does consent actually mean? What if someone is drunk? How do I know if someone's comfortable if they don't come out right out and tell me? I think this can be a good talking point with kids, and we have to know how to get comfortable with it ourselves, right, before we try to bring it up with them. If I'm happy, if I feel safe, and then asking me questions, just acting curious often can bring up way more information than if we ask for it directly. Okay, so the 3 biggies, the things I heard the most. I think I wish they were less awkward 50 times. I wanted to be like, well, you're awkward too. But I wish they were less awkward. I wish that they would ask me for information instead of demand it. And I don't want to talk about it. I'll bring it up myself. It's like, you will. No, you won't. So who has seen this before? Who has heard this or some extent of it? Yeah. So what I thought we could do is I can try to, in broad strokes, paint how can we maybe respond to this or start thinking about how to respond to some of these things as they come up. Does that sound okay? I'm going to lean into my counseling role a little bit. Okay. I wish they were less awkward. Who feels awkward talking about dating or relationships or what dating might imply is going on, right? And that's okay. It's awkward. It's uncomfortable to talk about. So unless you have been talking about dating and relationships with your kids from a young age, it's probably uncomfortable, and that's okay. We can embrace that. We can have flexible thinking and acknowledge with our kids, this is uncomfortable. I don't necessarily want to talk to you about this or know everything, and I think it's really, really important for us to at least start having a dialogue, right? Or talk about having a dialogue. We're not going to avoid the awkward because now we're not working on anything. We're not problem solving. I'm not getting the information to help. So what I'll often ask myself and coach parents are asking themselves is before you bring this up, before we try to bring this up the first time or try to bring it up again after it maybe not being so successful, what are my own hangups? What feelings am I noticing come up around this topic? Am I feeling uncomfortable? Do I have a dating history or a trauma history that might inform my thoughts about dating or my assumptions about dating, right? Am I noticing some assumptions about what my kids might be doing, right? Do I need to check the facts and remember what's in front of me versus what my worries are, right? I like to identify the worry thoughts and write them down and then think about, okay, how actually rationally reality-based is this and how much of this might just be plumb worry, right? It's not invalid. We don't want to judge ourselves, but I want to acknowledge this might have a bigger role than maybe it deserves. It might have an outsized role in my talking with my kid. Do I need to educate myself about something? Am I nervous that they're not being treated well in their relationship? Do I think that they're spending too much time together? Is this person becoming like everything to them? Are they expecting their partner to be, their therapist, their best friend, their homework helper, and boundaries are getting crossed, right? What do I maybe need to educate myself on so that I can have a conversation with my kiddo and feel informed and at least appear confident? We don't have to be confident, but we can fake it. There's a skill I teach my clients, and I'll let you guys in on it too because I think it's very helpful. Give. Who's heard of Dear Man or Give? Their DBT skills? Excellent. Okay. So, of course, Susan Bliss has heard of it. So, give. This is sort of what I'm keeping in mind when I'm talking to another person to help them feel appreciated, heard. It tends to help keep conversations going even when they become uncomfortable or awkward. So I want to be really mindful of using a gentle tone, appearing interested in what they have to say, using validating language. Validating is not agreeing. It is saying what your experience makes sense. And having an easy manner. If I want to be able to have, a collaborative, constructive conversation with my kid, I need to walk into it that way. If I want it to be a conversation, let's keep the tone conversational, right? And if I start to notice that things are escalating or they're getting really defensive or I'm starting to match their tone and it's not going to a helpful place, then we take a break, right? We say, I'm noticing that we're both getting a little, so let's take a little break. Let's go for a walk. Let's try this again later. We're not going to not talk about this just because it's uncomfortable. Right? And the more we try, the more we kind of point out the elephant in the room, the easier it becomes to kind of chip away a little bit. I find Give also just helpful in general with talking to kids, especially adolescents. appearing interested can be really great when they're talking about like the 5th fight that they've had with a friend, or they're talking about that video game that none of us care about. But if I could appear interested and invested and like I'm hanging on every word, that might help create a good foundation for when I want to have those tougher conversations, right? Am I comfortable coming to you? Do I think you're listening to me? Do you tend to listen to me and appear to hear me? Any questions about this so far? Go ahead. Sure. Yeah. So validating is not agreeing, right? I can validate someone's emotions. I will always go with validating emotions. I can validate their experience without agreeing with the behavior, right? So let's say I bring up, hey, you said you were going to come home at 11 last night. You know that's your curfew. You walked in the door at 11:30, right? We need to talk about this. And they start to get really defensive, they get upset, they start coming up with the excuses. I'm not going to validate the behavior of them coming home late. I'm not going to validate the behavior of them maybe having a full-blown tantrum in my kitchen. But I can validate, it looks like this was really upsetting for you to bring this up, right? I can validate, it looks like this is a stressful conversation for you. Or sounds like you really were trying to rush home last night and you didn't make it here on time. I can always validate the emotion. Emotions are valid, behaviors might not be. But I can validate someone without agreeing with the behavior. I can do the and. So I see that you're upset, and that doesn't mean that we don't have consequences. I can see that this is awkward for you to talk about this, and it doesn't mean that we're going to avoid it. What would make it easier to talk about? Does that help? Yeah, thank you. Okay. I wish to ask you kindly, who notices that sometimes, especially around dating or like safety-related things, my anxiety starts to go up? I might be a little testy. A little bit, yeah. So again, let's not judge ourselves. This happens. It comes from a place of wanting to protect. It's our job, right? It's to protect our kids. And when they're not giving us information, or when they're being, what's the word I'm looking for? A little shady with how much they're sharing, it can create and elicit more anxiety, because then my mind again starts to go to those worry thoughts. What aren't they telling me? What is going on? So again, I want to do a body scan. I want to notice my own stuff. Is this need to know information, or is this would be nice to know information? Am I having an experience of not having as much control or agency or knowledge about what's going on in my kids' lives, and that's creating anxiety? Is that creating the discomfort? Or am I uncomfortable actually with something going on with my kid? Can it be a little bit of both, right? Uncertainty, discomfort tends to create a lot, right, of that worry, that stress, that anxiety. And I think labeling what of this is mine and what of this might actually be coming from a situation with my kiddo can be helpful. Before we have any difficult conversation, but especially a conversation about dating that we probably want to treat as an ongoing conversation, I want to regulate myself. If I'm not in a good brain space, if I don't feel like I can be fully focused, if I've had a bad day, today's maybe not the day to do it, unless again, it's a safety concern. Right? Is there a reason why I must talk about dating with my kid today, even though I'm feeling really stressed out about it, or I'm not feeling comfortable with it right now? Will my fingers fall off if I don't have this conversation today? No. I can regulate myself. I can practice. I can talk with a friend. I can talk with a therapist, whatever I need to do to make it easier to talk. And there's also no rule saying that you alone as a parent or parent unit must talk about this with your kids. Right? This can be a conversation that you have in conjunction with a therapist. You can pick another family member to be having this conversation with. If there's a person that they feel safe with that you trust and you'd like to have a partnership with another person, or you're thinking, I don't think I'm going to get all the information, or I don't want my kids to feel like they have to give me every piece of information, let me make sure they have a safe person to go to. Right? It can be really difficult, I think, to relinquish some of that control, because that's not how we've parented up until like this high school point. And we all know our kids aren't telling us everything. So how do I create and foster that relationship of, I want to know, I want to keep you safe, and I don't need to know everything. If you're having trouble, come to me, and here's another person you can talk to, right? Has anyone done something like that? Have like another person or another partner that talks to kids about relationships or the tough stuff? No? We don't, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't give ourselves a backseat to helping our kids cope. Right? We're not relinquishing in terms of like, oh no, I'm not talking to you about that. Here's another person. But we can acknowledge, as your parent, I might not be the person you want to come to about everything all the time. And sometimes your best friend isn't the best person to go to either, right? For the aforementioned reasons about holes in the head that don't have great judgment yet. So is there a therapist we can talk to? Is there a family friend? That kind of thing. Again, if they're talking to somebody, they're talking to some adult, it's better than them not talking to anybody. Does that jive? We're nodding. Awesome. Okay, and again, we can use the give skill. Gentle, appear interested, validate, easy manner. Come on. Okay, I don't want to talk about dating. I don't want them to ask me. I will bring it up myself. So when our kids don't want to talk about it, this is again where we might want to lean into the, I understand you're uncomfortable. It's kind of uncomfortable for me too. And it doesn't mean that we totally avoid the topic, right? Avoidance never really leads to anything good or great. So if we know that our kids are at a stage where they might not even be dating yet or expressing interest, but like their friends are, they're at that developmental stage where it would be typical of them to start dating, expressing interest, we do want to create a relationship or create a space to talk about it. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll ask, where is somewhere that you can go or something that you can do together with your kid, with your parent that feels like it's just for you, and it can foster kind of that safe space for, hey, once a month we go for a walk on the beach. And if there's something you want to talk to me about, it's just you and I. You have my undivided attention. We're not making the family calendar. I'm not schlepping you to and from practice. I'm not multitasking. You just have me, right? Beach walk, lunch date, coffee date, going for a walk around the neighborhood, something where it's just you and your kid. It's not going to be an overnight fix. They're not going to just start, usually at least, not start being just totally forthcoming after that first time. But when we create that spot, that space, that place, that expectation of when we do this together, like this is when we can be open and honest, you'll get more information. You'll start to notice breadcrumbing in a different way. They'll give us the little breadcrumbs, the little pieces of information, and then it puts me in a better position to ask, right? I can be curious. I can ask without judgment. I can try to use that validating language so that I'm getting more information than I would if I, to use their words, demanded it, right? Or made it like a ultimatum. I must know or else, right? There's another skill. Who's heard of Dear Man? Susan? Awesome. Okay. So Dear Man's another one that I'll use with my parents and my kids, so I'll share it with you guys too. It's an acronym for asking for something or asserting myself in a way that's likely to be heard and likely to get the other person to agree, right? So if I can describe what's going on, express how I'm feeling, assert myself or ask for what it is I want to ask for, and have some way to reinforce it, right? Dear. While being mindful, appearing confident, and being willing to negotiate. That's going to be a recipe for success in terms of maybe asking my kid, hey, can we set up this one-on-one time once a month? Can we talk about how to be more comfortable talking about dating and some of these other things that come up that are uncomfortable? Can we talk a little bit about the relationship that you have with your girlfriend? I notice you're spending a lot of time with her and I don't really know her very well. Can we set some time aside to talk about it? Can you tell me something about your relationship? The whole process of Dear Man can be 2 sentences. It sounds very big and clunky. It looks like a script. It's just expressing myself in a way that's likely to be heard and being mindful of the other person. And again, just like we said before, if it starts to become argumentative or defensive or it's not getting anywhere, we take a break. We try again another time. Right? A lot of this depends on where they are as well, and it might take them a little longer to get comfortable than it does for us. Any questions about this one? Yeah. Mm-hmm. They say no. Yeah. So negotiating, I think the negotiating and staying mindful, I think, are the toughest parts about this one. So by stay mindful, I mean, like, I'm not going to give in to the distractors. So they're like, you always do this. I told you I don't want to talk about this. Oh, you're so embarrassing. I'm not going to give in to that and go, I'm not embarrassing, or I don't always talk about this. I say, no, we're talking about this right now, right? The negotiation part is if and when they inevitably say, no, I'm not going to do that thing. That's when we go back to the reinforcer. Right? So if my reinforcer for asking them to do something for me or asking them to have this conversation with me is something like, I bet I'll be on your back less if I think I have a little more information or if I know your girlfriend, right? If I've spent a little bit of time with your boyfriend, I bet I'll feel a little bit more comfortable in the relationship and not ask you so many questions, right? Then we can come back to the negotiation in terms of, okay, well, if you're not willing to have this conversation or collaboration with me, we can't really expect anything to change. right? We can't expect something to be different or better, bless you, without working on this. And something else about negotiating in general with our kids, it doesn't have to be a one-stop conversation, right? If they're not there, if they're not willing to come to the table, we try again at another time. Or we figure out what's getting in the way of them communicating with me, negotiating with me. Do I need to work on my own communication styles? Do we need to work on our relationship? Did I pick a bad time to bring this up, right? We don't do one and done. Does that help answer the question? Awesome. Go ahead.
You find that this is happening in friendships as well? Because New Canaan is small, and I
Mm-hmm.
have to, like, my kids went to a new school this year. I don't need a parent. I don't know their friends' house.
Right.
So
Oh, yeah.
I've done the whole negotiate, like, hey, I don't know these people, I've never met them.
Do they exist?
Who are they? Texting the parents, something like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if this happened, if it's just my kids, or
I don't think so. Yeah, this is especially as they start to get licenses, right? And we're hanging out, or we're becoming a little more independent, autonomous, making friends with people at new schools, people who transfer in and we don't know them. I think this can be really helpful too, just in terms of how do I broach, like, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about this. Let's meet in the middle somewhere. But yeah, I think this can absolutely come up in friendships, new friendships, and not knowing who are our kids spending time with. What else is coming up? Cover this one. I think too, let me find the slide. Well, here, I'll stay on this one in case anyone wants to look at Dear Man. But, something I'll hear from parents and my kids pretty consistently are kind of the dating mistakes, right? Or like the faux pas that might come up. And again, I think it comes back to what this age and stage is about, which is learning who am I in a relationship. Like, relationships and dating in high school are opportunities to practice boundaries, right? Learn what respect looks like, learn what my line looks like, who am I comfortable spending time with, how do I communicate my needs to somebody, how do I manage an argument with a loved one, a partner, differently than maybe I do with my parents or my siblings, right? All of these things that are so important for kids to know and have mastery over, and they lose out on if they're not dating, and they lose out on if they're not having the opportunity to make mistakes, right? So, the not being able to take a relationship offline because we're awkward in person together or the connection isn't there. How do I communicate that to somebody? How do I communicate to someone that the proper way to ask me out on a date isn't in front of a bunch of people, right? How do I communicate to someone that I'm not comfortable going to their parents' house, right? That I'd rather hang out at my house? How do I communicate that I want to be able to go out with friends first in a group before we split off individually? And again, these are all things where, as much as I think we'd like, at least I would like them to kind of skip to the part where they just know how to do these things and know how to advocate for themselves and know how to put boundaries in place and communicate effectively, they unfortunately have to have the discomfort of doing it wrong and experiencing other people not having maybe the same skills that they do to master some of this. What else is coming up? Go ahead.
So when Stacey and Jerry and I were talking about bringing you here and talking about this topic, so you really very well explained the bridge from a friendship to dating and that process. We also talked about, could you jump past, so now they're dating.
Right.
They've done all this. Am I going ahead?
No.
You're there.
I'm moving back.
Can you
Woo.
talk a little bit about, so now they've jumped through that, now they're in a relationship.
Yeah.
So now what?
Yes. So when they're in the relationship, they're actually meeting in real life. They're actually spending time together. A lot of it looks much like I think it did for us dating. We're spending time individually, especially the 9th, 10th graders, maybe spending more time in groups, those group hangouts, and then breaking off to hang out with the boyfriend or the girlfriend. Lots of spending time at each other's houses, more so than going out on like a date, going out to dinner, going to the movies. As much as kids beg for space from us, they also don't leave the house. So lots of hanging out with each other, wanting to spend time in the room, right? Or if there's a hangout space in your house, like a basement or a second living room or something like that. And for those of us who don't have that, the asking for privacy, right, is naturally a piece of that. So if I don't have, a living room or a den or a basement where my partner and I can be having a conversation and not worrying about like my sibling overhearing and coming in and interrupting and making fun of us, or my parents overhearing everything I say, it makes sense that they might want to hang out in their room, right? Especially the last 2 years, our kids' bedrooms kind of became a multi-purpose room, right? So they don't think about it the same way we do in terms of like, you are not going in your bedroom with a boy or a girl. What are you talking about? They don't understand why that is such a big deal to a lot of us. So again, I think this is where that conversation about what are we doing when we're dating, what are the rules around dating in my house, what of these are reasonable, what of these are just expectations, what of these are safety related. But the hanging out at home is definitely bigger. Most of my kids took the time to point out they're not all having sex. And that when they ask for privacy, when they go to the room, when they go in the basement and ask you not to come down, it's not because they're hooking up or someone said, I'm not doing something you disapprove of. It's, we just want private time. I buy it 80%. I buy what they're selling 80% off. I think sex and dating is something highly individualized, so I don't want to speak in too general terms. I know everyone has their own backgrounds and beliefs that their families abide by, and we can't not talk about it with our kids, right? We can express to them, this is how I regarded sex in my relationships growing up. These are the expectations or hopes I have for you. But if I don't talk to them about that, they're not going to know, right? And sex education in the United States isn't known for being excellent anyway, so we need to fill in the gaps. And again, do I need to get comfortable with that? Is this where I need to educate myself a little bit? And I did add some resources at the end as like a jumping off point. But I know sex and dating in high school can be really scary to talk about with kids because it's, am I too late to talk about it? What if I don't, what if I get information that I didn't want to have? What do I do with this? And how do I make sure that they're safe? And again, if we don't talk to them about it, we can't answer any of those questions. Go ahead. Very fine. Right. Oh, that's such a great question. Like, how do I strike that balance of like giving them the information and the education without making it sound like I condone this and I'm permissive of this? This might not be a great analogy, but I'm going to use it. I sort of look at it the same way as I look at talking to our kids about drugs and alcohol, right? I want you to know this is what alcohol does. This is what certain drugs do to the body. This is the risk, right? This is why people might reach for some of these things. And I hope that you never, ever, ever pick any of these things up. And if I don't talk about it, it's not like it's going to go away, right? And it's also okay to model for them your own emotional regulation and identification and say like, I'm uncomfortable talking about this, or I'm nervous to talk to you about this, but I think we do need to have a conversation about sex, right? And about safe sex and protection and consent and knowing, if your partner is consenting to what you're doing. Do you have questions for me, right? What do you know about protection? And you can also say, for the record, I would prefer you not to be having sex. I don't condone you doing it. I think it's too early, or I don't, I think it's really risky, and I'd like for you to wait as long as you can. And if you choose otherwise, it's like suspense. If you choose otherwise, I want you to have the information, because at the end of the day, as they're becoming more autonomous and independent, driving themselves, spending more time out of the house, if they want to have sex, they're going to have sex. So if they're making their own independent decisions, how can we provide that guidance and that information without condoning? And you can totally do both. It's just, you're right, it's a really funny balance. Go ahead.
Two things. My husband and I spoke before I came and asked any questions. One of the things he brought up was how you used to be able to, with boys or young adolescents would look at Playboy.
Mm-hmm.
Now online you can see anything.
Right.
Just kind of, you could touch on that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is, do you ever see children initiate or try out dating online with people from different states first before they actually try dating in person, in their town?
Yeah. Good questions. Okay, so the second one, do I see people trying out dating kind of virtually with people who aren't local to them? Yes, right? It's almost like a graduated approach to, let me keep this, yeah. Yeah, and with our kids too, it's always so funny to me how different it is for them, even from like my own experience. I'm in that sandwich generation of like, I did not grow up with social media, but I had social media it was probably about high school. So I know the experience of not having it and it being just ingrained in my social life and in the way we talk to each other. And with our kids, they don't know anything other than, well, this is just how we communicate. So it makes sense that these relationships start online, that they start virtually, that they sort of graduate to being in person, because that's how most social interactions take place. And yeah, if I can talk to someone knowing that I might not actually have to see them in person and they live in another state, or they live in like on the other side of the state, yeah, that seems low risk. I'll do that. And right, it sounds so. Right. And I have to like monitor my judgment, but I know sometimes I'm like, that just sounds so silly. Why are we having an exclusive like talking conversation with someone who I might never meet? But it's how they practice and learn their social skills, which we know are leaning more toward things being virtual, things being online. Everything's been hybrid the last 2 years. So it's not as though these aren't skills that they'll use, but they need to have the in-person interactions too. And remind me your first question. Oh, yes. Sneak the paired Playboy, yeah. Right. Like, for better or for worse. And that's the other thing, and I hope this doesn't sound fear-mongery, but I think you'll know what I mean. If we don't talk to them about sex, if I don't talk to them about consent, if I don't talk to them about what sex is, if I can't answer their questions about sex, they're going to look it up themselves. They're going to ask their friends who are also looking it up themselves. They're going to Google it, and they'll ultimately land on probably pornography, which is not a very accurate representation of what sex and healthy sex tends to look like, right? So we don't need to show them the appropriate pornography, but we can talk to them about, this is what sex is. What are some terms that you're hearing that you have questions about, right? Like, there's an article I linked to the end of this presentation that was written by a sexual health teacher, and she shared some of the questions she would get from grades like 7 through 12, and it's all questions like, what happens if I do something wrong? How do I know? Like, they don't know what sex is. So starting with the basics and asking them what they know can be a really good place to start. Or if you're nervous they're not going to give you information about what do they know, we ask, what are your friends talking about? What are the things that you and your friends are talking about? What questions do you have for me? Non-judgment zone. We don't have to talk to your siblings about this, but I just want you to feel informed. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. It stands for Get Naked on Camera. Yes. Sorry, I saved the scary one for last. I didn't mean to. Go ahead. We're going to talk about it. Bill's like, get me out of here. Guys, Bill's going to ghost us. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Well, and the other thing that tends to come up with friends being so involved in relationships is you might notice, oh, my son or my daughter was dating someone, and now someone in their friend group is dating them. Right? That's something that's been coming up a lot with some of my kids, and it's not uncommon anyway, but especially when they're spending so much time together, it kind of makes sense they might catch feels for other people, or when the relationship ends, well, I already know this person, so that's easy. Yeah, that was another term I forgot. Guys, catch feels. So the get naked on camera, the sexting, I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, I swear I did not mean to gloss over this, with social media. Poor Bill. So social media, I said, they're largely using Instagram, Snapchat, Discord, TikTok. They do use Tinder. All you have to do to be on Tinder is lie about your age. It's very easy. Same way, when you're ordering alcohol and you put in your birth date, that's what you do on Tinder to make a profile too, to say you're 18. So they are on Tinder. Sexting, so like simulating sex through text messaging with pictures, just talking, and then the GNOC, get naked on camera, that sometimes is the pressure to send naked pictures. And for us, we understand the risk. We understand, even if our kids don't think we do, we understand that a picture lasts forever. A picture can be distributed. If you send this to someone, they're showing it to their friends. We know this, but they don't. And it's not because of a willfulness. It's not because they're stupid. It's, again, this judgment center that hasn't been formed yet, and these strong feelings that they develop for each other so early on. This person would never share my picture. I can trust this person. It's going to show that I trust this person if I send them this picture. They might not want to date me anymore if I don't do that, because I know they're talking to other people, and other people might be sending them pictures. So if I don't, it's going to end the relationship, which, again, for us as adults, we're like, okay. Good. But that fear and that rejection just gets felt so intensely, and they don't have that forward future thinking that we have. It just becomes so much bigger and so much more black and white than it is for us. And that's why so many kids do engage in sexting, sending the pictures, that sort of thing. Again, it's not because they're stupid or they don't want to pay attention to your rules or be respectful of themselves. They don't see it that way. This is what you do in a relationship. Right? So again, talking to our kids about this might be something that you've engaged in or not. I don't know if you and your friends have been talking about this. You can blame me, throw me under the bus. Like, this woman came in today, and she thinks she knows all the kid terms. And she was talking about sexting, and I was intrigued by it. And I'm wondering, like, what do you know about that? Like, are people still doing that? Do people understand, like, the risk of it? Like, you can ask me questions about that if you ever need to, right? Like, start the conversation. I would stay away, my 2 cents. I would stay away from talking to them about, like, legal repercussions. It sails over their heads and it sounds too fear-mongery. I would go more with, I worry about those pictures being shared, right? Or I worry about if someone else saw them that you didn't want to see it, right? The pictures stick around forever. You might delete it, but someone else might not. What's something you can do instead? Right? Again, tough conversations, ones that we probably don't want to have. I'm not skipping and jumping to have this conversation. And if we don't have it, we can't assume that they're making excellent decisions. Fair? Go ahead. Yes. Okay.
Telling my child that if he has photos, inappropriate photos, say for example, of a cheerleader on his phone, whether or not he asks for them is irrelevant legally. And the only solution I would recommend in my legal team is to store the device. I will not be replaced. That's not this.
Ooh, I like that.
I don't know that not bringing in people that shouldn't.
Can I play devil's advocate? Can I play devil's advocate? Did they get rid of it, or did they get good at hiding it? Oh, the device was destroyed. Okay. Yeah. Well, and yeah. And you know your kid, again, I'm speaking in very general terms. I wouldn't have the initial conversation if I've never brought this up to my kids before. If we jump right to, and if you do this, I'm going to get rid of the phone, or there's going to be legal repercussions, you could get in trouble, it's child pornography, that might elicit a shutdown, depending on what kind of relationship you have with your kid. It also sounds like, in your case, it was very effective in terms of like, oh no, we're not playing this game. Say it again. Yes. Oh yeah, we need to be parents. We're not their friends. We're their parents. They need to know what the hard line is, and that I'm not going, part of your decision making also hinges on me too and affects me too. So we're not going to play that game. And if it's about being effective and getting information from them to know if they're safe and know what they're engaging in, collaborative tends to be a good way to go, with exception, of course. Go ahead. Okay. Right. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, if the photographs are sent, is it like Snapchat or text or?
It's usually Snapchat. Because the messages disappear. So again, there's this false sense of security of like, oh, well, if I send it, it's gonna fade away. It's gonna go away. They can't keep it. No, that's not true. I'm sorry? Yeah, you can message on TikTok. You can't put like naked or even like very scantily clad pictures on TikTok. They'll take it down. But messaging. Right.
Like, oh, my girlfriend sent me this.
Yeah.
He sends it to 50 of his
Mm-hmm.
friends. What do you do? What do you say to your child? How do I handle this?
Right. So if they're already engaging in it and your son's been sent something, I'm not going to pretend to be a legal expert. I'm a therapist, but I would do what you've suggested with, all right, you've let me know that this is on your phone. We're taking this and figuring out what to do with it. We are not engaging with this person right now. If they bring it to you and you know that, that's where we can go into parent protective safety mode and be like, nope, we're going to take care of this and make sure that everything's okay and make sure that you're not being implicated in someone else's poor decision making.
So with the pictures, is it boys and girls sending pictures?
Yeah.
Is it more pressure on girls to be sending pictures than boys? Just curious.
That's a good question.
Like, we're always talking.
Hi, Bill.
Still here.
Yeah. So it's both sexes. You know, I might be, I want to acknowledge my bias because I have more female clients than I do male clients, so I hear about it more from the girls, but that doesn't mean that it's not equal. Oh, yeah. Yes, they are.
Putting pressure on boys to send naked pictures.
I want to be careful.
You know, this is talking about empowering girls, right?
Right.
You know,
Do you really want to do that? What messaging does this send? What are you hoping to get out of doing this? How can we kind of change the decision making before something happens so we have more choices and more agency and have the ability to talk to them about it before hitting send, before the decision's kind of made for them, right? I saw, yes. Hi.
I'm wondering about, how do you know when, how does everybody know what to do other than looking at the phone at night? And then when you do find things on there that are not appropriate, then what do you do? Because on one hand, we go to them and provide privacy. But, and it's tough, right? Because if they don't know that we're going through their phones, for example, you guys can't hear me.
If they don't know that we're going through their phones, or if we find something that they probably didn't mean for us to see, it's sort of a tough act to undo, right? And that we might have to acknowledge that. Be like, I've looked at your phone, I saw this, you know, I'm concerned about this thing, right? And this is why. I'm not angry with you, I'm not judging you, but I'm concerned with this because this could affect your safety. This could have repercussions, whatever it is that's valid in creating concern. How do we talk about this together? How do we prevent you from doing this again? What do we need to put in place so that you don't, I'm going to use the picture example. What do we need to do so you don't send a picture or you don't say yes when someone asks for one, right? Are we taking your phone away, right? Have you been sending pictures and we need to look at other repercussions? Are you engaging with people in a sexual way that doesn't involve pictures, but it's too old or it's becoming risky, becoming scary? What are we going to do about that? And again, it doesn't all have to come from you, the parent, right? This can be where you're partnering with a therapist or partnering with a family friend, partnering with a doctor. You don't have to play all the roles, wear all the hats, right? Especially if you're concerned that they might not be totally forthcoming and honest. So most of my parents, they might monitor like location, and they'll let the kids know if they're going through their phones. They let them know like, hey, I will be looking at your phone. This is a device that I own. It's in my house, so I'm going to be looking through it. I only find it to be so effective because we only see what they know we're going to see. And everyone knows their own kid. You have your own household rules and reasoning behind how you monitor phones. I would just make sure more often than not that they know what you're doing, just to your point, so that it's not an extra thing of like, oh, I looked through your phone and you didn't know about that. So now we're talking about that as opposed to what it was that I actually found that I'm concerned about. Does that make sense? Cool. I want to be mindful of time. I know we're at 1:15. So if anyone needed to leave at 10:30, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that we passed 10:30. Okay, go ahead.
So, Melina, obviously, relationships, these first few relationships are intense and their relationships are wonderful. But obviously, inevitably, like, how do you best counsel kids when they kind of fall apart?
Yeah.
Really, someone's upset. What are some strategies?
Yeah, so when a breakup happens or when things aren't going well in a relationship. So I think we can lean in a lot to what you guys have probably already done when friendships don't go well or when friends are disappointing. We want to be there and be supportive and hear. And again, the older they get, the less they want our advice or our feedback. It can more be that guidance, or we can even ask, do you want my advice or do you just want me to listen, right? That caveat there, if there's a safety concern, right? If there's something going on in a relationship that's concerning from another way, that's where we can be a little more concrete, a little more, not forceful, but what's the word I'm looking for? Whatever, I'll say forceful, in terms of, this is what I'm concerned about. This isn't going well. We need to make sure that you're safe. This behavior from this person toward you, or the behavior that you are perpetrating on somebody, is totally unacceptable. And here's why, right? We're going to connect to resources. We're going to connect to supports. And sometimes I've had kids who have come to counseling or used to come to me in the Teen Talk office because of breakups. Breakups are difficult anyway, right, for all of us, regardless of how long the relationship was. And again, when their feelings are being felt really intensely and they have this black and white thinking and they can't think about the future in the same way that we can, breakups are extra devastating for them. So we can always offer too, hey, if you don't want to only talk to me about this, let's bring someone else in. Does that help answer the question? Cool. What else is coming up?
So this makes me feel so old, but
Me too.
I actually match my own age. So, and we've not gotten into all of this, but so dating, I can have a boyfriend online that I've never met. He's my boyfriend, and I'm dating him, but I've never actually seen him in person. And
Yeah.
I, as a parent, should be like, that's wonderful.
This is great. Right,
Don't have sex with him through the phone.
right,
So this is so normal.
right. Like, how wonderful. Right.
This seems cuckoo.
Oh, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, but it does.
Yeah.
But I did actually know most of those terms.
Yeah.
So, okay, so I'm just gonna be like, great.
This is awesome. I'm so happy. No, I think,
Is there a point where you do say, like, this is cool and you can trial test it, but just understand, like, Dad and I, we don't just.
I don't love this. Yeah. Right. Like, this isn't sustainable for the long run. We know this, right? And they don't. Exactly. That's where my mind goes to too. Like, how do you know who you're even talking to? And this is where, again, we have to, it's a really tough balance. And I know I didn't expect to capture it and answer everybody's specific question about this like today. Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for the feedback. I think noticing what's going on in your kids' relationships, knowing your kid, right? And knowing that line with what of this is, you know what, I'm going to let them figure out on their own that dating someone exclusively online probably isn't going to work, because if I tell them, they're not going to believe me. They're not going to care about what I say. They have to experience it on their own, right? We've had to implant ideas for them, right? So they think it's their own idea. We've all played this game. And at the same time, I'm still a parent. Right? If I have concerns, if I'm like, how do you know who you're talking to? And you absolutely are not going to be sending them pictures, or guess what's happening? Like, we can do both of those things, right? And it's tough because you're right. Like, if they're having a relationship with somebody exclusively online, it's not sustainable. And we know that. They might need to learn that on their own. What was it like? Yeah. And then what happened, right? And then they broke up, right? So they figured out on their own, I don't like that. And I bet, because I'm an optimist, that now the next time he starts a relationship with someone online, they're going to meet sooner. They're going to FaceTime, right? I hope something, but it's this really tough and I think at times uncomfortable notion of like, I have to let them make their own mistakes. And it's tough with dating because mistakes can also involve safety. So that's where, again, I come back to like, we want to lay that foundation of communication so that, and for them to come to me and for us to be checking in on this regularly so that I know and I can help them recognize if they don't and they don't have the insight for it, to know when something is unsafe, when something is unhelpful, when something is ineffective, and help kind of be that barometer with them. right? Because if I stood up here and said, yes, go through all their phones, give them all the rules about dating, would it be effective? Like, probably not, right? And of course, different rules work for different people. And from my seat being a therapist with kids and families, this is kind of what I've noticed the last few years. But yeah, what else? Yes.
Question. So once you have the big conversation, that's uncomfortable and awkward and you have it, how often do you have to revisit that? Like, are you sure you heard me?
Right. Like, I feel like we've talked about
They're
this.
not, they may not necessarily
Yeah.
feel uncomfortable
Mhm.
to some degree, but
Yeah.
I feel like I have to I don't want to harp on it too much.
Yeah. Isn't it funny too how kids will point out when we repeat ourselves and we haven't? But then when I do repeat myself and they don't hear it, I've probably said this 100 times, yes. So what I like to do with like the big conversation is kind of have that one that feels big, because maybe it's the first time that I've come about it like in an organized manner, or it's the first time that they're actually talking to me about it. But then I try to keep the conversation going, right? So I think it also takes some pressure off of having one big all-encompassing conversation, where we're having those little check-ins, right? So let's say you have the conversation about dating before they're even dating somebody, and then you start to notice they're spending time with someone, they let you know that they're talking to somebody that might not be IRL yet, but they're talking. What then do we kind of reintroduce, like, hey, we talked about dating a little bit ago. How do you think this applies to what we've talked about, right? Or what questions are coming up for you? Do you think you're going to meet this person? Like, when can I meet them? That kind of thing, so that we're keeping the conversation going as needed. And you also can, insert yourself. Say like, hey, we haven't talked about dating in a while, and I heard about XYZ. Right? What do you think about that? Are you and your friends talking about that? What do I need to know? Just acting curious. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, just
Okay.
to make sure I'm doing it enough.
Yeah.
Not too much.
Right. They'll tell you. Right. Go ahead.
My question is about when I have three older sisters and when I was in growing up through this stage, a lot of girls felt that boys their age were very immature, and so there was this desire to date someone.
Mm-hmm.
Seems as if that has gone away with everything kind of going online. That boys are not as behind as they used to be.
Mhm.
In
Because they don't have to have face-to-face interactions.
I don't know what the answer is, and I also think that the pandemic and social
Yeah.
distancing, especially in our part of the country, I'm sure has taken its toll
Mm-hmm.
on even having the confidence to
Mhm.
be with someone in real life kind of thing. Because
Right.
they weren't even with their friends a lot of the time in
Mhm.
real life. But it's interesting because so my question is, have boys kind of kept pace with the girls because of it being online?
I think communication styles and communication wise, it's gotten a little easier for boys to express themselves, because they can do it virtually, they can do it online, they can do it in a way that they're more comfortable with. And I think the same holds true for girls, right? In terms of reaching out to older boys or older men, because girls do tend to develop a little bit faster, that is still happening, and that's where Tinder might come in. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
When you're talking about like the age gap in relationships, you didn't talk a lot about consent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know you're not a lawyer, but I'm just wondering.
Oh my gosh. That sound.
For my, like I have a friend who, her daughter is dating a boy who's older. They've dated for a long time. The friend wasn't happy that the daughter was having sex when they found out. And the friend's like, I'm gonna file a report. I'm gonna file the police. But it was like a consensual relationship. They were 2 years apart. She's like, well, he was 16, she was 14. But
Mm.
we just kind of touched on consent. But,
Right.
you had mentioned, well, someone over there mentioned having a 16-year-old son dating a younger woman, or getting pictures sent to you. So how does that
Right.
work? Because if you're dating an older guy.
Mm-hmm. And when we have the sex talk and the dating talk might be two different conversations. And when we talk about sex with our kids, that is where we can also talk about, hey, legally, this is the age of consent. And you could put yourself and put your partner actually in a really precarious position if you're having sex before this age, right? Or if we're not being mindful of how the law stands, right? And how can we factor that into decision making about when do I have sex? Why do I think this law is in place? Where did this number come from? How could this maybe have been used to protect me? Like, why is this a rule, right? Why is this a law that we must abide by? And using it in that way so that there's more buy-in. But in terms of bringing it up to our kids, if you're nervous that they're already like having sex with someone who's older, I think it of course depends on the relationship and the safety of it. But this is why, we don't want like seniors dating freshmen, right? There's just such a huge gap in terms of like their development, and we don't want someone to be exploited. I think having regular conversations about this is the expectation, and I would really prefer not to be put in a position to have to wonder if we're breaking the law, right, when you're having sex with your partner. It's also totally fine, and not a lot of people talk about this, but it's fine to consult with, if you have a family attorney, on, hey, when my kids start dating and having sex, what do they need to know about like age of consent? When is like, what can they have sex with somebody who's 18 if they're 16 and vice versa? What do they need to know? Because then they're not hearing it from you. They're hearing it from somebody else who's an expert and knows what they're talking about, and they can't really argue with that as much as they can argue with parents, even if we know what we're talking about. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah. No, it's a good one. Go ahead.
I have a question about, if you find out something, I saw photographs of, this boy is, one of my son's friends, seeing a prostitute in his city. And it's, and the old boys were shocked, the oldest of boys.
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking, like, what does his mother feel, and what does she know?
Mm.
But it's not my business, right, to say something, what your son is doing, right?
Eh?
But on the other hand, it's like, poor kid is paying $300. I'm like, what?
Right. Like, what is this?
It's a lot of questions.
Yeah. Well, and are they a minor?
Well, he's 15.
Yeah.
And the girl, I believe, I don't know, whatever, I think she's 15.
Mm.
And so, it was like shocking. And so, but I know that to go to his mother and like describe it also. But on the other hand, I feel so that they're bad both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Some and for this
Yeah.
generation.
No, it's a really uncomfortable situation. Yeah. So again, I want to be mindful of my role. I'm not a public health expert or a lawyer, but I think if we ever have concerns about another person's kids or are concerned about especially if it's something safety and legal related, I actually would err on the side of let the parents know, right? We don't need to give them all the details, but we can let them know what you know in terms of like, hey, I learned about this. I'm concerned. I think some other kids are concerned too. You might already know about this and be talking to them about it, but I felt better making sure that a parent knew that this was going on so that it can be handled more appropriately than kids talking about it and that kind of thing. Does that help answer the question?
It does, but then she'll say like, mother, father will say like, how to know? And
Mm-hmm.
my son said this picture, so I said, you know, fire, right?
Are you worried about legal repercussions?
No, well, no, just photographs came to me, and my boys talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Friends doing this thing.
Right.
They're all shocked.
Right.
How can they all shocked? The boys, it's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And right. Right. Oh, it's the worst like trick, right? They say, "Oh, I'm going to tell you this, but don't say anything because then I'll never tell you again." You're like, "Okay, this is a trick." Right? No, we don't fall for that. We can still be parents. I think, if someone sends something to your son's phone, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but if they're getting it sent to them, I think that's where we can also take an active role in terms of, I want to make sure I'm not implicated again in someone else's poor decision making. So it might be helpful to consult with a lawyer or someone who knows more about that legal end of it than me. When this has come up in my private practice, I've consulted with lawyers. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on everything. And asking what is the best way to go about this to protect my son, but also, like you've said, to protect this other kid. Yeah, good idea. All right, I know we're at 11 o'clock, so I ran way over. I'm so sorry. I was just so excited. Oh, yeah.
And also, Principal Egan's here. He wasn't here in the beginning. I just want to introduce him for those of you who don't know. This is Bill Egan. I think his head just blew off for that last part of the conversation. But can we give a round of applause? I mean, Emma Kate was amazing, wasn't she? I mean, clearly she touched on something that is relevant and or of interest to many of you, especially with all those follow-up questions. And I think this is one of the more enlightening PFA meetings I've ever been to. So thank you so much. And Stacy, thank you for finding her. And you want to say something?
Well, I wanted to teach you the next slide about sex. And so I think everyone might want to take a picture of that. And we will send it out, but these are very helpful.
Yeah. So these will be on the slides. It took everything in me not to label this one, let's talk about sex. So,
And this will also be, like I said, on the PFA website. We'll post this. It usually is within a couple days.
yes.
But you can take pictures
Yeah, so
of it.
there's really, really good information out there. Psychology Today, APA, Child Mind Institute have really, really good info pieces out there about how to talk to your kids about sex at certain ages, how to talk to your kids about sex if you're concerned. I really love this tea video. Consent, has anyone else seen it? It's likening consent to how you like your tea. So if someone comes over and you offer them a pot of tea and they say yes, then you can pour them the tea. If they say no, we don't make them tea. If someone is asleep, we don't try to give them tea. Things like that. It's funny, and it's like, oh yeah, wait, this isn't hard. So I like these resources, and these will be available to you when the slides are shared. And I put some of my business cards up front, so if you ever have questions, want to reach out, if I'm not the person to answer the question, I'll direct you to someone who can, but I'm always happy to help out.
Bill, do you want to say anything? Or just? Yeah, okay.
Thanks, everyone.